I think that to be a top 1% marketer in the next handful of years, you have to. And this goes from junior all the way up to very high level CMO.
What's the difference between a marketer and a growth engineer?
When I think of a growth engineer, I think of someone that's a marketer by trade. They've got that piece, but they're very, very AI pilled.
How much would a growth engineer make? Is it different from what a marketer would get paid?
I think that growth engineers are going to command, call it maybe 30 to 60% higher salaries than the non-technical individual, call it growth marketer.
So what should someone do to promote themselves as a growth engineer?
The highest leverage that you can have right now as a marketer is understanding how to use those tools like the Claudes of the world.
Marketers should have a GitHub. So why do we need this?
I think of having a GitHub now as the resume of 5-10 years ago, because now that marketers are getting more technical, this sort of becomes the portfolio.
So how is this helping me apart from just being my portfolio?
Why engineers and developers have been using GitHub is for the ability to go from single player to multiplayer.
So do you want to show it to us?
Yeah, so
This episode with Jonathan, the AI marketer, is a practical guide to two things: how to use GitHub as a marketer and how your whole team can run on Notion as a shared knowledge hub. Watch this one on YouTube rather than just listening. We spend a solid 20 minutes screen sharing the actual build, and that's the part you'll want to see. Let's get into it. I've been following your newsletters. I know you from Claude for marketers, because I was literally searching how should marketers be using Claude. And before, we're going to have a lot of practical knowledge on this pod, on this particular episode. But before everything, tell me, what's the difference between a marketer and a growth engineer?
Sure. So it's something that I've been thinking about quite a lot because I've been in marketing for, gosh, not to age myself, but, really, really long time, 10, 15 plus years. And I started off as like digital marketing, which then led to growth marketing. And now we're hearing growth engineer, marketing engineer as like this new title. What I think about how like the evolution of marketing roles have progressed over the last, call it decade, is that they're just getting more technical because of the tools and the systems that are now out there for us. So as an example, with marketing engineers, now we're able to build out full websites, full lead magnets and tools, and work on GitHub, which was something that was only afforded, to engineers in the past, or really something that just developers and technical individuals were focused on. And so when I think of a growth engineer, I think of someone that's a marketer by trade, right? They've got that piece, but they're very, very AI pilled. Someone that's using Claude, that's using both Cowork and Code, that's using Lovable, N8N, like all these tools that have been coming out and that are thinking in systems more so than they're thinking in maybe how do I run this campaign? It's more of like, how do I set up the system to run 10 of these campaigns? So that's sort of how I think of the growth or marketing engineer title today and where the evolution of that is going.
So every marketer should be working towards this path, in your view?
I think that to be a top 1% marketer in the next handful of years, you have to get much more technical and in the weeds of building. And this goes from junior all the way up to very high level CMO. I think the most successful CMOs of the next decade are going to be more technical, are going to be leveraging all of these tools. And I sort of explained this in something that I was writing last week. I haven't published it yet, but similar to like a company or say like a founder of a landscaping company. If they start a landscaping company and start doing it without actually having been in the trenches and actually building these like beautiful backyards to start, they're not going to know what's possible, what it takes, and all of that. And it's similar with the CMO. If they're not actually building with an AI and in the trenches, they're not going to really know what's possible and how to direct their overall system and team. So, yeah, in short, I do think that the most successful marketers of the future will be inherently a lot more technical.
Yeah, I mean, I really resonate with that because I think I'm doing a lot more product than what I did before, and I'm building a lot. And I'm also in a better position to, I think all marketers are in a better position to just explain now to the engineering team what they really need because we've known forever what user experience looks like, what feedback is, and but we never had a good way to convey it. So, the biggest question, so we should become technical, we should build. Okay, let's say we are doing this already. Now there was, I think, also a discussion on LinkedIn and Twitter, X both, that marketers should have a GitHub, and we need a GitHub. So why do we need this? What all should we have? And where do we start?
Mhm. I think of having a GitHub now as the resume of 5, 10 years ago, because now that marketers are getting more technical, they're building, they're using Claude, this sort of becomes the portfolio of everything that you've built. And very similar to like a designer that would have a portfolio of all of the design that they've worked on, marketers are going to have that in the form of a GitHub. And so the way that I would think about it is really just one, of course, setting up a GitHub, which is essentially like a repo of all of your projects that houses all of the code that you've built. And it makes it really easy for you to, one, showcase it, but two, continuously access it from various devices so that, it's not stored just locally on your computer, but in the cloud. So just a quick primer on GitHub. And so one, like I mentioned, setting up the GitHub, but then two, starting to store all of the projects that you're building, whether they could be as simple as like landing pages or lead magnets or full on robust tools, and starting to build them in the GitHub repo that you create. So, yeah, I think I saw something go super viral within the last couple of weeks where someone had mentioned this on Twitter and then it got reposted across a variety of, LinkedIn, et cetera. And it was an individual basically saying like every marketer needs a GitHub. And I couldn't agree more. I wrote about this about half a year ago when I started to get really involved in Claude and all. And I sort of saw it because I was building all of these things. They were all stored locally on my computer. And then I started to learn a little bit more about GitHub, and I'm like, wow, I can actually start like sharing a lot of this with the world rather than it just sitting locally. And so, yeah, I do think that this is becoming, well, slowly. I don't think it's fast by any means now, but it is becoming more of the norm for marketers to have this GitHub so that they could share what they're building.
So, do you want to show it to us how it could ideally look like, or what should we have? And if somebody's starting today, what is it that they should put on their GitHub?
hmm Yeah, let's do it. So I'm happy to share like what I've been building. And then also I would love to get into how I think about maybe a marketing team running on GitHub so that you go from single player to multiplayer. Yeah. So GrowthPair is the agency that I run where we're helping companies with their global marketing talent. So you'll see that that's the name here. And this is where I started building. And you can see like around March was, and let's allow here. Okay, I just want to make sure you do see my screen. So you'll see the huge influx of all of the contributions that I was making into my GitHub repo. And within this GitHub repo, or yeah, the repo, there are all of the projects that I have worked on over the last 6 months. And so I think the one that you had mentioned that you had found me on was Claude Marketers. So the
Yes.
entire Claude Marketers Video Academy is created with Claude Code and hosted on GitHub. And then we use a couple other tools like Railway and BunnyNet to like actually host the videos and website. But this is how I started to build the portfolio on GitHub. And for me, I'm not really in a position where I'm actively seeking roles in marketing. I'm sort of, I'm a founder of a business, but I'm building a lot and I'm just very passionate about this space. So, not necessarily like a portfolio that I'm sharing with others, but this could be a portfolio that if I was applying for, say, a growth engineer role or, say, even a CMO role, this is something that I would want to share. And so, it's very simple in the sense that everything you build gets housed in here, and then you can either make your projects public or private. And you'll see that some of them are public, some of them are private. And I would recommend, without getting too far ahead, because I'm not sure exactly where we want to head here with this discussion, but I would recommend keeping everything private, just so that you're not exposing code and files that you may not want to go out to the web, but it still is able to showcase the projects you're working on without exposing the code and all. So I can click on one as an example, which is Claude Marketers, and you'll see within this project all of the different folders and files and everything that really makes up the Video Academy, all of the different commits that I've been making. I've been fairly active on it and still really improving the website. And you'll see here, like 2 days ago, I was making more improvements. But I'll pause there because that's sort of like how I would think about setting up the GitHub and sort of like putting all of your projects inside of it to showcase.
So, how is this helping me apart from just being like my portfolio? Does this also interact with other tools in some way? Or is it just like, okay, hey, I've been doing this and these are the skills I built. This is what I did for this is how I helped my product team add a feature. Or is it serving some other purpose also, like interacting with different tools, finding files for me, getting me answers quickly? That would take like a lot of time because that would be some like really useful.
hmm Firstly, yes, it's definitely something that you're going to be able to leverage again as a portfolio, but even more so, and why engineers and developers have been using GitHub is for both one, the ability to go from single player, which is local on your device, to multiplayer with projects. So, in the sense, or in the case of Claude Marketers, which is the Video Academy, if I started to build out a team around me, I could share this GitHub repo, this project with them, and then they can go ahead and start adding improvements and working alongside me on one project that's not just local to my device. And what's great about GitHub is that you see all of the changes that are being made. They're called commits. And so if I hover and click on this, you'll see that a couple days ago, I made some adjustments here. And if you have multiple individuals that are working on a GitHub project, you can see who's making what edits. And so it just makes it really easy to interact with more people on the same project, but it also allows all of the tools that you're using to connect into GitHub, to your point. So, being able to connect Claude Code directly into GitHub for every single individual on the team or any other tool that you may be wanting to connect into it. It just makes it super versatile and again, multiplayer in that sense.
Can you give me an example of the kind of answers that I can get or maybe you want to do it with Notion? I don't know,
Mm,
like how a team could work together with like shared folders on GitHub. But if you want, we can also, switch to Notion now and see
mhm.
that.
For sure. So one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, and we were chatting about it prior to recording, which was how do marketing teams go from single player over to multiplayer? How do they go from just working on their devices to sharing everything together so that it makes everyone smarter and more efficient? And one of the things that I always had an issue with, and I can say this confidently, many marketing teams have this issue. And when I was at, say, Postmates on the early growth team there were files in Box, files in Docs, files in Sheets, and like some files not even in any of that. It was just local on, say, this marketer's computer or this designer's laptop. And so, what's amazing about this next wave of where we're heading is the ability now to easily go multiplayer. And so, I wrote about this in March, which was that I believed marketing teams were going to start living inside of GitHub. And so, the concept here, and I actually built a demo project, which is this marketing team. I think I actually have a few, but we can dive into this one. Actually, let's see if there's a better one. I think I'd rather go into. No, this isn't it. Is it? Maybe. Mm,
So you wrote about it much before it actually went viral.
Here it is. Yeah, I just, because I was so early in Claude, I was able to test out how it all worked. And then I never even used GitHub prior to 6 months ago, but I could see the writing on the wall that this was going to be an amazing way for marketing teams to share together. And so when I wrote that essay, I also built a sample marketing team and how it would work inside of GitHub. And so what you'll see here is that you've got all of these folders, everything from brand guidelines to what the ICP is of your company. And I mean, the folders and the structure of all this can get as complex as you want and can house everything. But the idea here, going back to what I was saying before, is that if you have everything housed in GitHub and you share it with the entire team, now everyone in the team can connect into this with Claude or their tool of choice and start to work on campaigns with all of this context already preloaded. So it's not like someone on a marketing team is starting a campaign from scratch with no learnings from the past. And so this just makes it a lot better for either new individuals joining a team or even individuals that are currently on the team to have context on everything that's happening within the org. And so just to give like a more concrete example is, let's say I'm the CMO and I just had an executive meeting and we've decided to adjust our customer ICP. Yeah, I could go to every single individual on the marketing team or even let them know in call it a sync, or I can do that plus update this customer ICP folder with that information so that now when everyone loads into their Claude and they set up a new campaign, Claude now knows what that new customer ICP is. And also just going back to what I was showing with Claude marketers and all the commits, you can see all of the changes that are being made over time. So if we were to edit the customer ICP file, it would show when we did that, who did it, and what the changes were. And so this, again, it just allows everyone to be on the same page without having to go and scavenge for the historical learnings of paid social from a year ago. It's all living inside of this repo so that it just makes every next campaign even stronger and the team more efficient. But yeah, to your point, I also did this on Notion. I built this exact same setup. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a
That's a
question
lot.
because I'm just thinking of like my team or you know being in a meeting and proposing this that okay, let's just move everything to GitHub. And you always have like some people that are technology resistant and the question would come like, okay, how is this so different as compared to like Google Drive? We can't stick to Drive, and it's solving the same purpose.
Mm.
Now, a very specific question is that, say this is on Claude, and one of our team members goes and types, hey, I want to make like a new campaign, and pull me a campaign that was there in 2025 December and gave the best results on Reddit, and I want to replicate that. So I will get a specific answer to that. So that's the advantage of this, right? Did I
Correct.
understand? Okay.
That's exactly correct. It's essentially solving for disparate knowledge living everywhere and
Mm.
collecting it into one central source for the entire team to work out of.
Okay. Okay. So this is the argument that, okay, this is going to help us. And exactly. So if anybody new also joins and they have any questions, they can first go here in their Claude account with connected GitHub before coming to any of us with the same question. Thank you for explaining
Uh-huh.
in simple words. Now
Exactly.
please carry on.
hmm Yeah, it just makes it so much easier for both one, new individuals, new marketers to onboard, but two, the existing marketing team to interact with each other. Now, of course, you do need to maintain proper file structure. You do need to maintain actual logging, and it does require work. It's not a set it and forget it with a repo, with a project like this. But I do want to move over to a Notion, which is definitely it's the less technical version of this setup. If you're, say, a marketing team of just a handful and you want to get a taste of what this looks like, you can build a lot of this in Notion. And it works in the same way, which is you've got, and in this example here, I set up, by the way, all of this is in like a separate Notion account. And I also go into Claude, which is a demo account where I want to show how this works in practice, like actually pulling campaign data, et cetera. And so what you'll see here is I built out this team space, which is Marketing Team OS. And it's very similar to the GitHub in that you can call these the folders. So team and skills, marketing context. You've got prompts and agent library, a bunch of items that you would want the entire marketing team to have at all times. And more importantly, you would want them to have the most up-to-date information and the latest skills that the entire team is using. And so what we can do is I can share a little bit of how these folders look like. But before getting into that, I do want to double down on the fact that it is so important whether you go with Notion or a GitHub to, and I mention here like the rules that make it work, because it is so important. It's really logging everything. And so very similar to like what a marketing team would do before, which was let's log all of the campaign data on Google Sheets. Now it's just let's log it in Notion or let's log it in GitHub. So it's all available to everyone. And every campaign also should close with alerting. So that just goes back to the fact that you should be logging everything. And I guess some of these items here, now that I'm reading them over again from 1 through 5, are maybe a little redundant, but in short, just make sure you're logging everything to make this work well. And I think that there should be an owner. Typically, that would be someone like within marketing ops. It could be the CMO, someone that just makes sure that everyone is on top of this every single week and adding all of their information. So let's just go into one as an example here, which is marketing context. This is where you would put information like what your offering is, right? What's your one liner in your positioning? What's your ICP? This is all information that would continuously be updated based on adjustments that are being made, and something that you would want your team to have real-time information on so that their Claude instance or whatever model they're using is running off the latest and greatest information for your team. So let's, I think this is actually a good segue into Claude and showcasing maybe if I was a marketer at a startup, what I would be doing. And so as an example with this would sort of like be the campaigns folder, which I may not even have in here, but let's say I had a campaigns folder in GitHub. Same exact concept where it's just a page within Notion and that's how it's organized. So this is all of everything that's logged. But what's really cool is if we go into Claude and I start to ask it something like, what are the best performing campaigns from the last 2 weeks? And we'll let that do its work, but it's going to go in. And because I'm connected using the Notion connector on Claude, it's now able to access all of the information that my marketing team has been adding into here every week, which are all the campaigns, how they performed, everything within the marketing org living in here. And so actually it does not, it thinks it wants to go into meta ads, but I'm going to say uh, use Notion, and this should all be in the marketing OS. Claude might be a little bit finicky here. Sorry, just because this is a free account that I'm using that's not the typical one. It's all demo data. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just it's exactly what I wanted to cover actually. That's all I'm saying.
Ah,
And while it's thinking, but this model or this template can also serve a one-person marketing team, right? Or do I need to have team members for this? If I'm working with product team, engineering team, because most marketing teams are now shrinking rather than expanding.
hmm that's a good question. And I would say that it definitely works for smaller teams, even teams of one. And it's good practice because once you have all that housed inside of Notion or GitHub, what's nice is that as you add more to the marketing team, now they have all of this context when they join and can connect their Claude instance into all of this so that when they're building campaigns or running projects, they now have all of this context to build from. And I would also say, like, if there are founder operators listening or others that maybe aren't just in the marketing org, this works for really any other org as well. And could work if you're just a small startup of less than 5 individuals and you want to house everything from marketing to operations to all of the important information so that your entire team has the context that you want them to have. And so, yeah, it definitely works with shrinking marketing teams or leaner teams. So
Okay.
what it did here is it went through the campaigns. And again, there's not much data here. You can imagine this with maybe hundreds of rows over the course of years even, and it being able to go through that in mere seconds and give me information on the best performing campaigns. So you'll see here, it's saying that the top performer was founder-led paid social. It's giving me the reason why. And I can double down even further and say like, okay, what was the messaging that was used? What quarter was it run in? Which accounts were, and really get into the details if I was looking to analyze this more. Of course, this is just a demo, but I just wanted to give the example of actually querying that Notion OS, the marketing OS, and getting information back, uh, and being able to action off of it.
How long did it take you to build this Notion knowledge OS?
So this is actually really new. I just started building this OS knowledge base within the last week, specifically for this podcast. I was primarily doing a lot of this on GitHub or in other folders within like my actual Notion account. But now that I've started to think through, and this is a relatively new sort of thought process that I've had, which is okay, if I'm not wanting to dabble all the way into GitHub, how do I do it in a lighter way to approach? Which is where I had the idea to, okay, let's run this on Notion. And it works very similarly. As you can see, there's the structure like we have on GitHub with all of the folders. And this is essentially mapping to all of the folders here. And it allows you to query it on Claude and centralizes everything. But yeah, super, super new. But I do think that more and more teams are going to start to implement something like this if they don't want to dive directly into like a GitHub setup.
And how much will this cost? This is like which tier of Notion?
This is, I believe I'm just on the starter tier. So
Mhm.
I'm not paying more than, I think, 100 a month for myself and two other individuals on the team. So I know they do per user pricing, but you can for a lean team do all of this, and so many startups are already on Notion. So if you're on Notion, it makes it even easier. And so it's a really cost effective way. And I would say not only cost effective, but the learnings and the saving in terms of time and costs and not making the same mistake again on a marketing campaign that was run a year ago and having that logged here is going to outweigh all of those costs tenfold. Um, but also, and I'll just quickly mention, a lot of this structure can actually be built using Claude. You can go into Claude and say, hey, can you build me a marketing OS folder structure on Notion? And it can build a lot of this for you, which is sort of what I did here. Of course, I edited some items, but it got me like 70, 80% of the way there. And it's something that can be built relatively quickly within a handful of hours. The long portion of time, like the duration of time that it'll take to actually fill it all out will be a lot longer than actually like building out the structure of it. Depending on how mature your startup is, how much information you have, and how much you want to add into it. But in terms of costs, super cost effective, and in terms of setup, very, very lightweight approach to getting something like this off the ground.
Can we share this template somehow with people who are listening, or you feel like the best way is to just ask Claude with the prompt you suggested?
I can make this public and we can share
Okay.
this to the listeners and if that's helpful. But I think that this is definitely a good starting ground. It'll vary by company to company, and of course you can delete and edit things, but I think this gets most companies 80% of the way there.
What is the biggest problem this has solved for you personally? I mean, do you have a team or are you working single? I mean, you it seems like you're doing a lot. So how has this, which bottleneck has this solved for you?
It's a team of 3 for us at GrowthPair. So we're super lean. And I say this all the time, but the last company that I co-founded, we had a team of 40 and we're at 60, 70% of the revenue with GrowthPair with 3 people. So, and a lot of that is because of Claude and because of systems like this and being able to make sure that we're not making the same mistake twice and logging everything and of course like you need to set the culture of that on a marketing team. So if that's the CMO or the founder, making sure that everyone's getting in the rhythm of actually logging everything and using the latest skills and using the latest context and being connected to Notion through the Claude connectors as an example. That's also important. I think for me, it's really allowed me to do that. It's allowed the company to stay really lean and allowed us to do context sharing without having to have a team sync every other day on campaigns that we're running. It's all just living in here. And we have a culture of logging everything, which then allows us to trust that this is the latest and greatest. And so, yeah, I mean, it just saves us a lot of time and allows us to stay nimble as a startup. And I think as we continue to expand, this sort of setup will also be implemented. And it already really kind of is implemented across the other functions within the company, like call it sales or operations. So again, this can be replicated for the entire company across different orgs. But yeah, I believe it'll continue to allow us to stay super lean and fast with what we're building.
As I hope we haven't missed anything, but I think most of the things we discussed about this about the GitHub and Notion, right? To get started. So what are the three things I do tomorrow if I want to start? I think we have some steps. Should we
Mhm.
recap it?
Sure. So I would urge on the first for every marketer to set up a GitHub. Start building your projects out of there so that you have a working portfolio and what I'm calling the new age resume. And I think a lot of people are saying this, and I agree completely. We as marketers are getting a lot more technical, and with that comes a lot of the projects we're building, which is so much fun. And so I would say that that is number one. And it doesn't really take much of a lift to set up a GitHub repo. A lot of that can be set up within 5, 10, 15 minutes. I would say keep most of it private unless you're willing to share the code base and all the folders. So just make sure you have the right security measures in place. And then for two, if you're working within a marketing team or you're a marketing leader, the next big step that you can take to really keep your team lean, fast, and efficient is to start building out these systems, whether it's within GitHub, like I shared, or within Notion, so that your team can have the latest and greatest context on everything that you're building. And then the third is instilling the culture of logging. That's still so important. That doesn't going from Google Docs and Sheets and Dropbox, et cetera, to a Notion or a GitHub does not replace logging. Teams still need to be, if anything, even more precise and diligent about what exactly they're logging as far as the campaigns that they're running and brand guidelines if they're changing. And so that needs to be instilled within the company for this to actually work really, really well. But if those three things are done, I believe that'll lead to top 1% marketers and top 1% marketing teams. And I do think it's like the next wave of the growth engineer and how marketing teams operate and how marketers operate.
How much would a growth engineer make, like in terms of money? Is it different from what a marketer would get paid?
I feel that we're heading into, like you mentioned earlier, to an era of leaner teams across the board. We're already seeing it, right? It's no surprise, no secret, especially within marketing, especially within other orgs as well. And so I do think that this is going to lead to better, stronger teams. And I also think that because the team is leaner, it will lead to higher salaries for these folks because instead of paying 10 people 100 grand a year as an example, you can pay 3 people 150 grand and you're still well below what you were spending before and you're probably even getting a higher output. So, I have so many other thoughts about where all of this talent will go and talent displacement and all those things, maybe say for another time. But I think that growth engineers or what are being dubbed marketing engineers are going to command, call it maybe 30 to 60% higher salaries than the non-technical individual, call it growth marketer.
So, what should someone do to promote themselves as a growth engineer or apply for growth engineer jobs if till now they haven't touched all this? Like, what is my checklist to go before I apply for growth engineering roles?
Start using Claude. It's as easy as that, and it's really just immersing yourself, whether it's Claude or Codex or I prefer Claude, but just starting to build there, starting with simple co-work, right, and having it do research and having it do manual tasks that you were working on before, and then graduating to Claude Code where you're actually building out some of these web apps and projects. But I think the biggest use of or the highest leverage that you can have right now as a marketer is understanding how to use those tools like the Claudes of the world and just spending as much time. And I know we were chatting earlier too that it's difficult when you have a full-time job and you're trying to learn all of this at the same time. I completely understand that. And so trying to carve out as much time as you can and even advocating for yourself if you need to within a marketing team or within a startup on say, hey, I need a day every week for the next 12 weeks, for the next quarter to just immerse myself in Claude. And you can promise them like, hey, if you give me those each, one day every week for a quarter, I'm going to be 5, 10x more efficient. It's going to far outweigh the time that I spent learning it. And so send them a clip of this podcast, right? And I think they'll understand maybe a little bit more if they don't already on why it's important for you as a marketer to get more into the weeds on getting technical and building with Claude. But that would be my number one above all else recommendation is just immerse yourself in all of this.
And I think like also like Claude for marketers, no, like it was so helpful because it's so structured. And when you go to YouTube, you get like 10 videos on one topic. So I think that's also good advice that just pick one course. I know it sounds like so conventional, but it works that somebody has just aggregated the info for you. So I've done your Claude for marketers, but if from your, you have like, I don't know, over 15,000 subscribers on your Substack, but if somebody has to pick up like the top three things, what would you suggest them to start with?
I'd say that as far as resources, Claude marketers, I didn't want to mention it and like and plug the website too much, but you did it for me, so thank you. I
It
would
was
say
very
that's
useful. Yeah.
it was a passion project that now has led to lots of cool opportunities like our chat here, which is how you found me. And so that's we've had 15,000 marketers sign up there over the last 4 or 5 months. So lots of folks referring and enjoying that course that I built. It's very hands-on and video esque, which and I when I was recording them, I made it a point to not edit out mistakes I was making to show that hey, that's the natural way of using AI. It's not always going to be perfect as much as we would love it to be. And then I think just there are many other creators that are also posting about their latest builds, whether it's on Substack or on LinkedIn. And I just recommend following your favorites on there. I don't really have like two or three that I follow consistently, but I'm just constantly scrolling my feeds. And I think that both LinkedIn and X know that that's the type of content I want at this point. So when I open up LinkedIn or X at this point, and at this stage, a lot of the content I'm being served are Claude. So if you just start immersing yourself in some of these creators and content, your feeds will naturally become more of that, right? With how the algorithms work. So that's another one. I know that's not like it's a little abstract, but I think just seeing what others are building is super helpful. And then you asked for three. The third, I mean, I guess I'll put my Substack in there. It's called the AI Marketer, and I write a lot about Claude on there and what I'm building and the latest on my mind. But yeah, those are the three.
Okay, now let's have our rapid fire, and I think we are going well with the time. So you can answer very quickly whatever comes to your mind, the first thing. The most overrated AI marketing tool right now.
I don't have one, but I would say any that tried to replace paid acquisition. I've seen so many of them float around where it's like plug and play, you let it do its thing. I haven't really seen one, whether it's on the campaign front or creative front, that can take a paid manager's job away. And I don't really ever think that that will be possible. I think you still need human in the loop. So any of that or any of those, I know this is rapid fire and this is not a quick answer, but I get very passionate about these about these questions. And so I would also say any tool that says replace your CMO with AI. I've seen a lot of those, and
Oh,
I think
AI
that's
CMO.
AI CMO. If it was just if I had to give a quick answer, it'd be AI CMO. But
Yeah, we all know
yeah,
that company. So, okay. And which is the most underrated one that nobody is talking about?
Ooh, underrated one. I think one of the tools that I've really enjoyed working with or using is Whisper Flow. I think within the tech community, you'll see that I used it in the podcast earlier when I was prompting Claude.
Mhm.
I just hit function on my keyboard, spoke, and it's much faster than my typing. And I would say I'm a pretty fast typer. I think Whisper Flow and these speech to text tools are going to get a lot more mainstream in the next year or two, but I don't think it's quite there yet. But I would say Whisper Flow is a great one.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. Okay, so one prompt every marketer should steal from you. Tough.
Ooh, I recently actually, this is very timely, built a project called Delete Slop. And we think as marketers or as individuals that use a lot of AI can tell when something is either written with AI or designed by AI. So I built two copy and paste prompts that you can plug and play into Claude, and it builds out the skills to basically guardrail your Claude instance from straying into M dash territory or using certain fonts that are very AI tells on your Claude Code websites. So I would say just the removal of AI slop, whether it's with my skill or others that are building in the space as well.
Notion or GitHub, which one would you pick if you?
Personally, would use GitHub. I think if you asked me this 6 months ago, I would say Notion. But as I've gotten a little bit more technical, I do think that GitHub is a lot more flexible and a better long-term solution than Notion. It does take more understanding, but I think that if you can get over that learning curve and that hump, that GitHub is the better solution.
The one marketing job that AI will not touch for 5 years.
I believe that growth engineers, right, is I would like to say no rules. I think it's definitely touching paid acquisition. Media buyers are becoming less and less needed at companies, and I think it's moving towards more creative strategists, where companies are looking for individuals that can create the briefs for paid social and work with influencers, etc. So that's one side. But I think on the other, if you're technical, if you're doing everything we chatted about on this pod, you're going to be very safe into the future. And then I'll add a second one, which would be design roles. So if you're copywriter, graphic designer, video editor, I think all of that is very safe. You still need taste and judgment. But I think most marketing roles are actually safe. It's just evolving more than anything. And if you're staying ahead of it by using AI, you're going to be just fine.
You need to be top 1%. I like how you said in the pod. And that's true. Actually, I don't want a bad designer because Claude is better than that and a bad writer. So I just need like the good ones. Okay, and this is the last one. So what are you building next that you haven't told anyone yet?
I'm just heads down with making GrowthPair even better by the day. And so, what's really cool and something that we actually haven't publicly launched or mentioned is our matchmaking system, which was largely manual before. Now, because of Claude and all of the AI, we're able to take transcripts from all the interviews, the assessment results from all the candidates, and then match them up with the transcripts from the discovery calls and all the requirements from our clients on their job descriptions, feed all of that into a system that then scores all of the candidates in our talent pool to match them with the best fit. This was great before because we had marketers doing all this matchmaking and a lot of data. But now it's amazing because it allows us to do this at scale and there's just less failure points. So I guess that would be one. And then just overall continuing to build GrowthPair into the best global marketing talent company there is.
We wish you all the best for this. I mean, this is companies need this, marketers need this, and we need more transparency in hiring as well. Thanks, Jonathan. This was so much fun. And I'm sure any marketer, operator, single founder, solo founder listening to this definitely took something they could apply tomorrow. And we will share everything in our show notes. And go and do the Claude Marketer course for anybody who hasn't. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.